Long before our species ever left the sunny continent of Africa, the Neanderthals lived throughout the lands of Europe and Asia. In a time that almost seems mythical to us, these hardy people survived in a world full of fearsome predators and colossal creatures. Despite the competition, the Neanderthals thrived for hundreds of thousands of years. Today we will be talking about all the strange and wonderful extinct animals that the Neanderthals shared their world with. This is the first episode of a series where I will document all of the creatures humanity has had the pleasure to witness. First, let's get a basic understanding of Neanderthals since a lot of people don't really know much about them. Early Neanderthals first appeared roughly 430,000 years ago in Iberia, likely descending from Homo heidelbergensis. This is the same hominin that our own species descends from, though in Africa. True Neanderthals with characteristic traits would evolve in Europe roughly 300,000 years ago. These hominins were shorter than the average modern human, with males standing around 1.64 meters or 5 foot 5 inches tall, though they were more heavily muscled and on average weighed between 70 to 80 kilograms or 155 to 175 pounds. They had powerful physiques with broad shoulders, strong limbs, and dense bones. They created complex technology out of stone that I personally have trouble reproducing. This included large and extremely sharp spear points and knife blades. Wooden spears from the Schöningen site in Germany from over 400,000 years ago show that complex wooden javelins were being made even at this time. Neanderthals likely used heavy-duty thrusting spears with massive stone points as well as wooden javelins and stone knives. These weapons combined with their athletic physiques made them formidable hunters. Neanderthals lived throughout most of Europe and Central and Western Asia. This range was full of a diversity of different animals. One of our best clues for understanding how Neanderthals interacted with these animals is by looking at their bones. Since Neanderthals often used close-range weaponry, they got injured a lot. Evidence suggests that large herbivores, and particularly predators, were responsible for Neanderthal injuries. A 2016 paper looked at 124 Neanderthal specimens and analyzed the source of their skeletal trauma. By comparing these wounds to wounds seen on modern skeletal remains, the researchers were able to deduce with high accuracy what animal was responsible. 36% were victims of bear attacks, 21% were attacked by big cats, and 17% had evidence of wolf attacks. Many of these attacks were claw or bite marks on the limbs. Others were to more vital regions and likely took the lives of their victims. It is clear that predators provided a significant threat to Neanderthals. But what actually were these animals? Cave lions must have been some of the most fearsome animals of the Neanderthal world. Like modern lions, they were extremely powerful and athletic animals, though cave lions were around 25% larger than modern lions. Males typically weighed between 150 to 250 kilograms or 330 to 550 pounds. Some larger individuals potentially reached up to 300 kilograms or 660 pounds. These beasts hunted all kinds of animals, typically megafauna such as aurochs, bison, horse, and deer. Occasionally they would have taken down young mammoths or even woolly rhinoceros. Evidence suggests that Neanderthals occasionally fell victim to these predators. In the prior sample mentioned, 26 attacks are thought to have come from felids. Felids typically attack victims who are facing away and target the head and neck and shoulders. We will never know how these Neanderthals were injured, though it must have been brutal. Perhaps more interestingly, we have direct evidence that Neanderthals preyed upon cave lions. Direct evidence of hunting has been found in a 48,000-year-old cave lion found in Germany. Comparative analysis of the lesion found on the lion's ribs suggests that a fatal thrust or throw was made by a wooden spear. This may have been the earliest evidence of large predator hunting in human history. This sounds crazy, but there are accounts of indigenous South Americans hunting jaguar with wooden thrusting spears. I personally love this example because it reminds us not to underestimate the hunting prowess of ancient humans. With a relatively simple wooden spear, some Neanderthal was able to end the life of a cave lion. The cave lion was then butchered and probably fed the whole tribe. There is some further evidence that Neanderthals skinned a cave lion over 190,000 years ago. This evidence comes from cut marks on phalanges, which suggest the butcher was trying to keep the skin in one piece. I can't stop thinking about a Neanderthal draped in a cave lion's skin. Cave lions may have been directly hunted to eliminate them as competition over food and cave space. Doing so would have certainly made Neanderthal life a little easier. But cave lions were far from the only felids they had to worry about. During the last glacial period, leopards were found in Europe. These leopards were far larger on average than modern leopards, but were more or less the same. Some Neanderthal sites contain evidence of leopards, though evidence of interactions with them is limited. Another animal which was present in the range of the Neanderthals were tigers. Even in historic times, the Caspian tiger lived around the Caspian Sea and in the Caucasus, a region many consider to be in Europe and Asia. But regardless, Neanderthals lived in these regions and even far into Siberia. Neanderthals undoubtedly crossed paths with tigers many times, which is quite interesting to imagine. Tigers are a lot different than cave lions in their behavior. They are known to stealthily hunt humans even in the modern day, and solitary Neanderthals would have been on the menu. Another animal that Neanderthals ran into, which we typically associate with the American continents, is the jaguar. Though in this case, the European jaguar, or Panthera gambazozoagensis. This animal was larger than American jaguars at between 150 to 460 pounds or 70 to 210 kilograms. They lived in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years hunting megafauna, but would eventually go extinct around 300,000 years ago. This is within the timeline of Neanderthal existence, meaning Neanderthals almost certainly interacted with these formidable predators. Perhaps the most intimidating felid of the Neanderthal world was Homotherium, or the scimitar cat. The name scimitar cat comes from its long, curved canines that could be up to 6 inches or 15 centimeters in length. These highly specialized weapons may have been used for slicing the arteries of larger prey. They were lighter than other big cats of the time at between 330 and 550 pounds or 150 to 250 kilograms. Though even a small Homotherium was twice the weight of most Neanderthals. Such a large and dangerous cat could have easily overpowered even an adult male Neanderthal. Well, we have already mentioned 5 deadly big cats that lived throughout the Neanderthal range, and we are just getting started. The cave hyena may have been just as terrifying as any big cat. Cave hyenas were around 20% larger than modern spotted hyenas at between 80 to 100 kilograms or 175 to 220 pounds. They had massive jaws and heavily built skulls that could crack some of the largest bones of the time. If you have ever seen footage of hyenas harassing lions in Africa, then you understand how brutal these animals can be. Direct evidence has preserved hyena bite marks on the bones of Neanderthals. 2 sites, La Chapelle-la-Sainte and El Cedron, contain heavily processed Neanderthal remains. We may not be entirely sure how these Neanderthals died, though we do know that they ended up in the stomachs of cave hyenas. Neanderthals and cave hyenas hunted many of the same animals, and also liked to spend time in caves. We can only imagine how brutal it would have been to fight off cave hyenas in a dark, frigid cave. It makes most of us realize how lucky we are to be born in modern times. The next animal we must mention is the cave bear. The cave bear was a massive species of bear that survived in Europe until the arrival of modern humans. Perhaps surprisingly, by studying the teeth of cave bears, we know that they mostly ate a plant-based diet, feeding on roots, nuts, fruits, and leaves. Believe it or not, even 70 to 90% of the diet of a brown bear comes from plant matter. Despite their mostly vegetarian diet, they were not to be messed with. They were larger than most modern bears, with males weighing between 350 to 600 kilograms or 770 to 1,300 pounds. Some brown and polar bears attain this size in the modern day, though this is much larger than the average grizzly bear, which weighs 270 kilograms or 600 pounds. When standing on their hind legs, cave bears were as tall as 3 meters or 10 feet tall. They had massive skulls with large canines and deadly claws. A bad encounter with one of these beasts would have been terrifying. As mentioned previously, out of the 124 Neanderthal remains studied, 36% showed evidence of injuries from bears. Out of this sample, that is the highest. Bears in general do not typically target humans as a food source, though surprise encounters or defensive mothers often trigger attacks. Both Neanderthals, cave bears, and steppe and brown bears spent long periods of time in caves. which might explain why they were frequently encountering each other. However, we have compelling evidence that Neanderthals may have been directly exploiting these animals. There are a handful of caves in Europe that Neanderthals appear to have used for cave bear hunting. At Rio Secco, in the foothills of the Italian Alps, Neanderthals appear to have used this cave almost exclusively for bear hunting. They would venture into the cave likely when the bears were hibernating and attack the animals. Hibernating bears are not actually asleep the entire time. They are in a state of torpor, which can range from light to deep sleep, meaning that when these Neanderthals entered the cave, the bear or multiple bears may have noticed them, woke up, and fought back. You can only imagine how frightening it must have been to sneak into a cave with only a simple spear to face a sleeping Goliath. Someone seriously has to make a Neanderthal video game at this point. Neanderthals may have not targeted the largest hibernating bears, but still they must have hoped for a lucky shot, or else they had to be ready for the fight of their life. As seen by their skeletal remains, Neanderthals got injured by bears and often very severely. It is hard to even imagine in the modern day the courage it would take to enter a dark cave full of literal monsters. It humbly reminds us how hard life was for our Paleolithic ancestors and species like the Neanderthals. Bears may have been seen as a potential opportunity for Neanderthal hunters, though the last predators to cover may have been seen as a friend from time to time. Wolves and Neanderthals lived amongst each other for hundreds of thousands of years in Europe and Asia. Both species hunted similar prey and would have frequently ran into each other. From the sample of 124 Neanderthals, 17% of them had injuries associated with wolf attacks. This may have been due to conflicts over carcasses or even caves, as wolves are often known to live in. Though as humans, we know that wolves can be different from other predators. After all, many of us have the descendants of wolves lazily sleeping on our floors right now. Some researchers propose that wolves may have followed Neanderthals, scavenging their leftovers. This relationship could have laid the groundwork for early cooperation between wolves and later human populations, even if Neanderthals did not domesticate them. Some young wolves stranded from their parents may have been adopted from time to time. We know from contemporary indigenous groups that even dangerous animals are adopted once in a while. Though we have no real evidence to support this hypothesis, I can't help but think about the interactions Neanderthals and the ancestors of man's best friend might have had. Before we move on to the discussion of herbivores of the Neanderthal world, I want to mention an event that this video is a part of. Around 24 archaeology creators, including myself, decided to get together to promote each other and real archaeology. I'm sure you watched many of these creators already, but make sure to check out everyone on here. Check out the online event and the other creators at real-archaeology.com. And thanks to Flint Dibble and the others for helping to set this thing up. Now let's get back to the video. Predators would have been a constant terrifying threat to the Neanderthals, though herbivores were opportunities at life. With every kill, the tribe could eat and in turn live another day. Hunting was a regular part of Neanderthal life, and their diets appear to have consisted largely of animal products. Reindeer, red deer, and Ice Age horses were the most common animals eaten by Neanderthals. Aurochs were another species that they hunted often. Though this species is technically extinct, they are the direct ancestors of modern cattle. When wild, they were larger, weighing up to 1,000 kilograms or 2,200 pounds. They had large horns that could have been deadly to any predator. Aurochs actually survived in Europe well into medieval times, with the last one dying out in Poland in 1627. Modern efforts to breed animals similar to the aurochs have been fairly successful, and some wish for these animals to once again roam the forests of Europe. The next large herbivores that Neanderthals hunted were Megaloceros or the Irish elk. These massive deer lived all over the Neanderthal world. They were on average a little bit larger than a modern moose or European elk, but the main difference was their absolutely giant antlers. Their antlers could reach up to 3.7 meters or 12 feet from tip to tip. That is twice the width of the largest moose ever hunted. They had a broad and palm shape that is sort of comparable to modern moose, but obviously much bigger. They had the largest antlers ever discovered and were undoubtedly intimidating animals. Considering that modern moose are very dangerous animals and kill more people than grizzly bears every year, a large number of Neanderthals may have been injured by these animals. Another pointy animal that Neanderthals hunted were woolly rhinoceros, These animals don't get nearly enough mention in the modern day. They were truly beautiful creatures, as we can see in later modern human cave art. They ranged from 1,500 kilograms or 3,300 pounds to as much as 3,000 kilograms or 6,600 pounds. They had 2 horns on their snout, and their front horn could reach up to a meter or 3.3 feet in length. Rhinoceros have always been some of my favorite animals due to the fact that they literally have spikes on their face. Looking at pictures of modern rhinoceros helps you appreciate how fascinating their woolly relatives would have looked in life. Though these animals were massive and dangerous, Neanderthals do appear to have hunted and scavenged them. At a site in Jersey, woolly rhinoceros remains were found among other animals. Neanderthal stone points and evidence of large animal hunting at the site indicate that Neanderthals may have driven these animals over cliffs, though this has been disputed. Unfortunately, we don't have any more evidence that these animals were directly hunted. Though due to remains found across Europe, we know Neanderthals were at least eating them whether hunted or scavenged. 2 lesser-known species, Merck's rhinoceros and the narrow-nosed rhinoceros, also lived in the Neanderthal world. They were smaller at around 1,800 kilograms or 4,000 pounds. Perhaps these animals were easier to hunt, though we don't have much direct evidence. The most famous animal of the Neanderthal world would certainly be the woolly mammoth. These glorious animals are basically the symbol of the Ice Age. They are relatives of modern elephants, particularly the Asian elephant, which still grows a lot of hair. They were around the same size of modern African elephants and up to 3 meters or 10 feet tall and weighed between 4,000 to 6,000 kilograms or 8,000 to 13,000 pounds. Though these animals were massive and near invincible when fully grown, our evidence suggests that Neanderthals did exploit them from time to time. At the site in Jersey we previously mentioned about stampeding rhinoceros off of cliffs, mammoths have also been found in the assemblage. It is possible that these animals were driven off the cliff, though the evidence is disputed at best. Luckily, regarding mammoth hunting, we do have more evidence. At the site of Spy Cave in Belgium, we have evidence that Neanderthals regularly preyed on young mammoths. The site has many interesting remains, including an abnormally high frequency of young mammoth skulls. Researchers hypothesize that young mammoths were targeted by these Neanderthals for their brain matter. Young mammoths, depending on their age, typically have larger brains than humans, and they are full of vitamins and essential long-chain fatty acids. Neanderthals were less efficient than some modern humans at creating these fatty acids, which are very important for neural growth. Therefore, whether they knew it or not, eating these mammoth brains actually helped them with their own brain development. Another interesting point about baby mammoths is that they are not naturally afraid of humans. Young elephant calves have no instinctive fear of humans and are known to attach themselves to them. It is possible that baby mammoths were even kept as some kind of pet or cattle in rare instances. It is fun to speculate, but of course, we don't have any evidence suggesting this. A variety of other notable Neanderthal sites, such as Krapina or Bizavaya, show evidence that mammoth remains were butchered. We may not have evidence that Neanderthals hunted adult mammoths, though as we will see in the next example, they were more than capable of doing so. Paleoloxodon antiquus, also known as the straight-tusked elephant, was a massive proboscidean that inhabited Eurasia during the Pleistocene. These animals typically lived in more temperate regions than mammoths, though during warmer interglacial periods, they were widespread throughout the entirety of Europe. They were between 3 to 3.5 meters or 10 to 11.5 feet at the shoulder, though some reached up to 4 meters or 13 feet tall. They were heavier than the largest African elephants at between 6 to 12,000 kilograms or 13,000 to 26,000 pounds. The heaviest straight-tusked elephants were twice the weight of the heaviest woolly mammoths. Despite their truly massive size, compelling evidence suggests that Neanderthals actually hunted these animals. At the site of Leiringen in Germany, a wooden spear was found embedded in the rib of a straight-tusked elephant dating to 125,000 years ago. Wooden implements from this far back are extremely rare to find, and the fact that the spear was found embedded in an elephant's rib is nothing less than extraordinary. However, it cannot be said with certainty that this implement or others like it were responsible for the animal's death, though the elephant was butchered with dozens of flint implements also found at the site. suggesting Neanderthals were able to obtain prime cuts from the carcass. Fortunately, we have more evidence relating to Neanderthal mammoth hunting. At another site in Germany called Neumark Nord, remains of straight-tusked elephants have been found in association with lithic artifacts attributed to Neanderthals. A 2023 study found Neanderthals had primary access to fresh Paleoloxodon carcasses. The carcasses also represent a very specific part of the elephant's population. This indicates that the elephants did not die natural deaths, but instead were targeted for their specific demographic. Old male elephants typically keep to themselves outside of the mating season, and Neanderthals seem to have capitalized off of this behavior. Neumark Nord is located on the shore of an ancient lake. These Neanderthals may have targeted old lone males next to lakes to limit their mobility. Though it sounds far-fetched to kill such a massive animal with only simple wooden spears, studies on indigenous people who hunted elephants in the 19th century prove that it can be done. Indigenous people hunted elephants with spears as a way to gain prestige with their culture, but also of course due to the insane amount of meat such a kill provides. The straight-tusked elephants that were killed at Neumark Nord would have provided 2,500 portions of the daily caloric requirements of Neanderthals. It would have been difficult to keep this meat from going bad, though it appears that the Neanderthals had a way to utilize much of the meat. A couple of other prominent sites throughout Germany during the Middle Pleistocene support the idea that Neanderthals were exploiting elephants for tens of thousands of years. The last proboscideans that we must mention are the 4 Pygmy species that lived on islands in the Mediterranean. 2 species of dwarf Paleoloxodon lived in Sicily and 1 in Malta, one of which was only a meter or 3.3 feet tall. Another species, Paleoloxodon tiliensis, was 1.6 meters or 5 feet tall and lived on the Greek island of Tylos until around 4,000 years ago. The last species, Elephas cyproides, was 1.4 meters or 4.6 feet tall and lived on the island of Cyprus. Neanderthals may have ran into these creatures as they did inhabit various Mediterranean islands, but they don't seem to have lived on any of the islands that these species lived on. I still can't help but think of a Neanderthal coming across a miniature version of an animal they know as a giant. It must have been fascinating for them to see. During warmer interglacial periods, hippopotamus ranged all the way into southern Europe and Western Asia. 3 different species lived in these territories. They tended to be larger than modern hippos, particularly Hippopotamus major, which weighed between 2,500 to 3,500 kilograms or 5,500 to 7,700 pounds. Another species, named Hexaprotodon, had 6 massive incisors in its jaws rather than the normal 4. This gave this beast a terrifying appearance. The range of these animals overlapped with the range of Neanderthals, making it almost certain they met. Hippos are extremely dangerous and will go out of their way to attack animals encroaching on their territory. We don't have any direct evidence of interactions between the two, though it is so strange to imagine that they would have run into each other. Another strange animal that Neanderthals shared a range with were camels. Camels still live all over Central Asia, and during the Pleistocene, a few species of camel lived here. One extinct species, Camelus noblici, weighed as much as 1,000 kilograms or 2,200 pounds. Bactrian camels still live in this range, though they are a domesticated variety. Only 950 wild Bactrian camels remain in Eurasia today. Camels would have been a common animal to come across for Neanderthals and were in all likelihood targeted from time to time. The last bizarre animal that Neanderthals ran into were giant otters. A few species of giant saltwater otters lived in the Mediterranean at this time. The Sardinian otter was one of the largest otters to ever exist, reaching a length of 3 meters or 9.8 feet and weighing 50 kilograms or 110 pounds. This animal was the largest predator of Sardinia and Corsica during the Pleistocene. Unfortunately, we don't have evidence that Neanderthals made it to Sardinia or Corsica, but the possibility exists that they crossed paths with these animals at one time or another. A variety of other Mediterranean otters may have encountered Neanderthals, though they are much smaller than the giant Sardinian otter. The world of the Neanderthals was one of untamed wilderness, teeming with creatures that have long since vanished. From towering mammoths and elephants to saber-toothed Homo therium, their world was full of animals that now only live in fantasy and prehistory. These animals were not just a backdrop, but a vital part of the Neanderthal experience, influencing their tools, shelter, and subsistence strategies. Though we will never truly be able to understand what it must have been like living with these animals, we know that they were a crucial part of the story of the Neanderthals, a story that forms a chapter in the wider history of humanity, the greatest story ever told. Thank you all for watching this video. How did you like this style of video? I'm considering covering Homo erectus next, and then maybe Homo floresiensis. What do you guys think? Comment your ideas below. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps to share these videos to a wider audience, which is ultimately my goal. This has been your host, Northo2, and I'll see you in the next one. Arrivederci and adios.